Can eyewitness reports of UFO sightings really be believed? Are some accounts nothing more than deliberate lies? How many of the most widely accepted UFO encounters were in fact nothing more than mistakes or practical jokes? The battle between true and false evidence in this chapter of UFO Diaries. One of the most remarkable stories in the UFO Diaries began on the night before Halloween, 1938. The famous actor and director Orson Welles led his Mercury Theater of the Air in a radio drama in the form of a news broadcast, telling their listening audience that invaders from Mars were rapidly conquering the entire Earth. In spite of announcements telling everyone the show was dramatized, thousands believed it was a real event, and panic broke out across the country. Orson Welles and the members of the Mercury Theater seem to have proven that a story about invaders from another planet could be readily believed by thousands, even when there's not one scrap of truth behind it. For all practical purposes, they had invented the UFO hoax. But according to many UFO researchers, that hoax would by no means be the last.
Yeah, right.
In the last 50 years, there have been hundreds of people who have come forward with various UFO claims, but it later turned out upon investigation that these people were in fact hoaxers. The hoaxes themselves can range from simply taking a UFO picture to writing books claiming that the individual had flown to Venus on a UFO. In some cases, the individuals will present evidence which supposedly backs up their story, but again, upon investigation, the evidence proved not to be valid.
Because of hoaxers, UFO researchers have been forced to provide more evidence for their claims. So for all of us seeking the real truth behind the UFO phenomena, hoaxes and frauds are a continual nuisance, especially when they're accepted by a large number of people as being the real truth.
But how can hoaxes be detected? What methods do UFO researchers use to determine the credibility of a UFO report?
It's generally helpful to consider the motivations of a person presenting a UFO report.
Historian Curtis Peebles tells how the truth behind one UFO report was discovered.
In 1950, a man named Frank Scully wrote a book titled Behind the Flying Saucers. In it, he claimed that the U.S. government had recovered a crashed flying saucer near Aztec, New Mexico. Scully said he had been told the story of the crash by a millionaire oil man named Silas Newton.
Now look, I'm giving you the story of the century, and if you know what's good for you, you're going to take it and run with it.
That may be true, but I'm not going to write no story based on the evidence you told me. I have a reputation at stake.
Now look, what if I were to give you some incontrovertible, verifiable proof that what I'm telling you is true?
What kind of undeniable proof can you show me?
And now you take a look at these.
Newton described this disc as having remarkable qualities that no earthly material could match.
Scientists in the country test it. He says it's bona fide. If he says it is, you know it is.
All right, Silas, I'll test these. And if they're true, I'll write your story.
That's all I want.
In fact, it was ordinary aluminum, the same as used in pots and pans. It had taken one very resourceful newspaper man named J.P. Kahn to uncover the truth behind the story. They used the crash saucer story to defraud investors in their various oil exploration schemes.
In here, we tell them we got out of space, man, and we sell them shares at $50 per. And we say, hell, these guys are going back and forth between worlds. They sure as hell can dig a well.
Subsequently led to their arrest and conviction on fraud charges.
The Aztec incident and J.P. Kahn's exposure of the hoax illustrate how much confusion a hoax can cause in the field of UFO research. But what kind of evidence can be believed? After all, with many UFO sightings, there seems to be no real proof at all. Only one person's story of what they claim they saw. Is it in fact impossible to obtain real proof of visitors from outer space? even now that humankind has begun its own exploration of space. It would seem difficult to stage a false UFO sighting here. So would an astronaut's report of unidentified flying objects be considered undeniable evidence?
During the early days of manned spaceflight, UFO sightings by astronauts seem to have been fairly common. But now UFO researchers are divided on how many of these accounts can be considered reliable.
In some cases, the astronaut sightings were caused by simple mistakes by the astronauts themselves. One good example is the sighting which occurred on Gemini 4 by Jim McDivitt. He describes seeing a large cylindrical object with an arm sticking out of its side passing relatively close to the spacecraft. It wasn't until many years later that the object was identified as being Gemini 4's own booster rocket, which was in a similar orbit. It was a simple mistake, but it wasn't an alien spaceship.
It seems some UFO incidents may be hoaxes. Others may be little more than mistaken identity. So what kind of evidence is truly undeniable? Can we believe a UFO sighting that leaves visible traces and is photographed by dozens of observers and that continues to occur night after night? Or could even this kind of sighting somehow be faked? Some of the most talked about UFO reports of all time have come from this one small part of Florida, Gulf Breeze. Located between Eglin Air Force Base and the Pensacola Naval Air Station, it seems reasonable for the sky over Gulf Breeze to often be filled with aircraft. But these flying objects are not what one might expect to see.
In November of 1987, a builder in Gulf Breeze, Florida by the name of Ed Walters said that while he was working at his desk, he noticed a light outside his window. When he went out to check, it was a UFO craft. He happened to have a camera. He took a picture of a very clear kind of lantern-shaped object. In quick succession over the next few weeks, he was able to take a whole bunch more very clear UFO photos that many ufologists have both endorsed and found to be maybe a little too perfect, if you catch my drift. He had a lot of other elements to this story that are a little strange to accept.
Ed had a situation where he was lifted up towards the craft and apparently dropped back down, although we're not sure that there wasn't perhaps more that happened to that.
He had a lot of incidents of aliens apparently talking to him in his mind.
There's a videotape which is extremely dramatic of the craft, which Ed took. Ed was also being abducted in the middle of these experiences, some of which he's recalled consciously, some with hypnotic regressions. Very dramatic content revealed.
As intriguing as this story may be, how much of it do we know for a fact? The best evidence of Walter's account is the photographs, but do they really prove anything?
He has people that are residents of the Gulf Breeze region who corroborate his report by having seen the same type of craft. Unfortunately, there haven't been other residents in Gulf Breeze that have taken similarly clear pictures.
Dr. Bruce Maccabee, who is an optical physicist and a very respected scientist, who works for the government, as a matter of fact, has analyzed the films, the cameras, the whole situation, and testified to the authenticity of the pictures, and it's a very solid, very powerful case.
It would seem the Gulf Breeze sightings make up the most reliable and credible accounts ever of an encounter with UFOs. But could even these reports somehow be false? Apparently, the Gulf Breeze sightings have split the UFO research field into two factions: those who believe in Ed Walter's story and those who do not.
There are many inconsistencies with the Ed Walters case. Mr. William G. Heiser, an independent photographic analysis person that was retained by myself through the Polaroid Corporation, has stated that photograph 19, without a doubt, is definitely a double-exposed picture. Photo 19 was a picture of a UFO taken on a roadway. The truck that Ed Walters was driving in was off of the roadway. He took this picture through the windshield of his truck. It shows an object allegedly hovering over the roadway, shining a light from the bottom of the craft onto the roadway. There is no reflection of the UFO in the hood of the truck. The object is what we call in the envelope area of the picture, which means that there very definitely should be luminosity reflecting off of the hood of the truck.
Ed Walter's son Danny has a friend named Tommy who later came out and claimed that he helped Ed Walters manufacture some of the photos. And Walters subsequently denied a lot of what was going on. And when the evidence came out that Walters had also been a party to making fake pictures during some of his children's parties, it began to look suspicious to a lot of UFO researchers. I think there's a lot that needs to be looked into.
There was a model found in a home previously owned by Ed Walters. This home was bought by Sarah and Robert Menzer.
The man found in the attic a model of a spaceship made out of blueprints. It was a paper model made out of blueprints that had Ed Walters' name on it.
It is my opinion that Ed Walters used this model in the beginning. It was one of the prototypes that he started. He probably made many models. This was one of the earlier models. And by the way, this was not a model that was shown in any of the pictures that Ed Walters took. In my opinion, Ed put the model there after reporters and investigators had come over to his house, and rather than trash it or put it into a drawer where maybe an investigator might want to search his bedroom or whatever, looking for that type of thing, he decided to put it under the insulation in the attic and just left it there, figuring it would probably never be found.
They were saying, Ed Walters is very smart. He's faked all these pictures. And when he moved out, he took every single object that he owned except this one incriminating piece of evidence. That already is a suspicious thing.
The debate over the Gulf Breeze UFOs has gone on for years. But are researchers any closer to a conclusion? Are the Gulf Breeze sightings true or false?
To this day, the story is not corroborated by anything more than other visual reports by residents of Gulf Breeze, and there are some parts to the story that are considered unusual or unexplainable by some other researchers who have looked into it.
Mr. Ed Walters has claimed to have passed 4 polygraph tests. Actually, he took 2 polygraph tests and 2 PSE tests. However, all the tests that he passed were self-sponsored tests. And self-sponsored tests are considered by any polygraph expert worth his salt to be an invalid test.
And there's strong evidence that evidence has been planted to try to discredit the case. The blueprints that this thing was made out of, and Ed had thrown away a lot of blueprints on the sidewalk, so it was very easy for somebody, when he moved, he had all this junk he was throwing out. These were Xeroxes of things. Obviously, somebody could pick this up, and the idea that, of course, he would construct this out of his own blueprints is a little odd, but this was a way of tying it to him. But when they analyzed the blueprints, they found out that these blueprints were of a series of drawings that he had made a couple of years after the pictures were taken, showing that this could not possibly have been the object.
And yet one key question continually arises. Why? Why would Ed Walters create such an elaborate deception?
When Ed Walters realized how easily the Gulf Breeze investigators were accepting his photographs, he decided, in my opinion, to make more. It then became a national story. And by that time, in my opinion, he realized he could never turn back. It would be too embarrassing. And besides, in my opinion, he was having fun.
So the debate over Gulf Breeze continues and leads us to the question, can we ever really prove a UFO event? What would it take to convince the most hardened skeptic? What if someone claimed to have not only seen a UFO, but to have seen the beings inside the craft and claimed to have physical evidence to prove it?
Since the late 1970s, there have been an increasing number of people who have described being forcibly taken aboard a flying saucer and then subjected to terrifying experiments. Yet, despite all the hundreds of cases, there's very little in the way of solid, tangible evidence that these events are actually occurring.
Few aspects of the UFO phenomenon are more troubling than the reports of abductions. According to a number of people who claim to have had the experience, alien intruders have kidnapped them, often from their own homes, brought them aboard their own craft, and subjected them to medical examination. But have these stories been proven to describe real events?
If somebody remembers being abducted out of an automobile or a backyard or a car or a bedroom or something, very often that person is literally missing and is being searched for. We have many cases where the police are called, hours-long searches take place, and the person magically turns up exactly back in the place they had disappeared from.
furthermore, they come back with unusual marks on their bodies, with scars, with scoop marks, with bruises, and the scar might be extraordinarily dramatic, 3, 4, 5, 7 inches long. And we have this many, many times.
But do scars that seem to appear from nowhere and episodes of missing time really constitute tangible proof that these abduction experiences are real?
In terms of hoaxes, outright hoaxes with abductions, I think they're very, very rare. The point is, if somebody comes to you and says, I have these memories. I remember, you know, these little people around the bed. I remember floating out a window. I remember this and that. I don't know whether I'm going crazy or not. I've been to a therapist. I don't know what to make of this. It really upsets me.
Taking UFOs seriously, and especially reporting them, is very difficult for many people. It may even be dangerous for them, given the fact that there's so much ridicule associated with it. Anyone who sees a UFO is often accused of being insane, hallucinating, or drunk, and it's been so for 100 years at least. Abductees know that something strange, unusual, maybe even horrific has happened to them, but they have only a very vague, in most cases, very vague memory of what it is. But they know something's there, and somehow they don't seem to be able to get to what it is. Ever since the Barney and Betty Hill case, the typical means of getting to what happened to them has been hypnosis.
Why don't we count backwards from 10? 10. 9. But on that ship, they did something.
Hypnosis does seem to open up this memory block or whatever is preventing recollection. And what comes out is this quite elaborate and sometimes horrific story of the abduction, with physical examination, strange beings, the whole familiar works.
Does hypnosis indicate alien abductions are real? Or does it prove that something quite different may be happening?
Hypnosis has a lot of problems. Its reputation as something almost mystical has haunted it for a long time. It also has some very serious questions in the scientific community.
Now, we're going to count from 10 to 0.
One experiment was carried out in the late 1970s by Alvin Lawson, professor of English, and several associates, where they took some people who did not claim UFO abductions and hypnotized them to see what kind of abduction story they would give out. Well, they gave out a story that was in some respects quite similar to the normal abduction story. And Lawson concluded that, well, if people can tell an abduction story that's a reasonable facsimile of the real one, without ever having the experience, then there must be no experience underlying it. That in fact we do have enough, basic information in our heads that anybody can tell a convincing abduction story under hypnosis, and therefore there's no reason to believe that there's any sort of genuine experience underlying these stories.
Does this experiment prove that so-called abductees are telling the truth? Or are they only relating some experience they imagined that somehow seems as real to them as any other?
Hypnosis is certainly no absolute truth serum. It's no proof that the remembered event is true. People can confuse reality and imagination while under hypnosis.
But many UFO researchers believe the abduction stories are still significant, whether they were obtained through hypnosis or not.
If you had to just explain what people remember consciously with no hypnosis involved, it would be a massive problem for the skeptics to deal with. We use hypnosis because it works.
It seems that some UFO researchers have indeed set a high standard for the kind of evidence they will accept as genuine. So how many UFO reports survive this kind of scrutiny? How will we finally know when we have undeniable evidence? If intelligent beings from another world are visiting us here on Earth, it seems reasonable to believe they are far superior to us in intelligence and technology. With this logic, one might suspect that they would be able to study us, even interact with us, without ever leaving positive evidence of their presence here. Does this mean, then, that we'll never be able to prove or disprove the existence of extraterrestrial beings on Earth?
It's a question of evidence. Are the abduction accounts alone sufficient to prove the event is occurring, or is something more tangible needed? Something like, say, the landing on the White House lawn.
I don't understand the motivation for making general statements like, if these things exist, where's the physical evidence? All elements of physical evidence that you could possibly want exist. We have pieces of material that allegedly came from a flying saucer in private hands. We have landing trace cases where the UFOs, the flying saucers, interact with the environment, and there are things that can be studied there. We have photographic cases where the computer enhancement techniques and whatnot have not been able to tell us a mechanism for hoaxing the photos. We have not found the strings holding the object up, for example. There are videotapes, there are movie footage, there are good eyewitness accounts from credible individuals, there are multiple witness cases. Every criticism offered by the debunkers, and I separate the debunkers from the skeptics, but every explanation offered by the debunkers as a reason for not believing in the UFO phenomenon is not a credible reason.
Because people have been seeing UFOs on every continent, in every culture, dating back hundreds or thousands of years, all over the world. Millions and millions of people, and these are eyewitnesses. If it was in a court of law, their testimony would be enough to send you away to jail. But because it's UFOs, it's weird, well, that can't be true. I think probably 90% of all UFO sightings are misidentifications of explainable phenomenon, but it's also true that 9 out of 10 UFO sightings aren't reported at all. We really have no idea how many people over the years have seen these things, but the numbers are staggering, and the reports are consistent.
The question of whether humans are alone in the universe has been debated for centuries. The answer may come sooner than we expect, and in ways we cannot anticipate.
But until then, the world still waits for absolute proof of the truth or falsehood of UFOs. And we will continue to watch the skies and carefully record every bit of evidence in the UFO Diaries. Are alien invaders abducting Earth's citizens? Are we, as some experts claim, simply guinea pigs for some intergalactic science project? Is there any way to know which of us may be the next target of an alien abduction? You may find the answers profoundly disturbing, even frightening, as we explore the most famous abduction stories ever recorded in the UFO Diaries. Even to the countless thousands who now believe in extraterrestrial life, the reports of alien abductions may still seem incredible. If these stories are true, then our concept of the place our world holds in the universe may have to be radically reappraised. For most of us, that possibility may be too awesome to contemplate. Stories of creatures from outer space that violate our communities, our homes, even our very bodies, are brushed aside by most people as the stuff that comic books are made of. And yet, new abduction reports continue to be made, as they have ever since a dark night in 1961.
The first abduction story to ever get any national publicity was the case of Barney and Betty Hill. They were driving home from a vacation trip through the mountains of New Hampshire in September of 1961 when they saw this strange light in the sky that seemed to follow them, and it approached them quite closely.
Betty Hill still vividly remembers exactly what happened.
Barney decides to get out with the binoculars in an attempt to identify this craft.
And he saw some, what looked like a being on board who was looking at him through the window, and he became quite frightened, began to flee. They drove quickly away, and then this object seemed to come down close over the car. They heard a beeping sound. They turned off the main road, seemingly under the control of some unusual force. As they got there, a roadblock of several unusual-looking individuals stopped them, and they got out of the car and followed these strange beings into this space. Well, you can only describe it as a spaceship.
According to the Hills, while they were on board, they received a strange physical examination. Betty Hill tells us what happened.
They checked our eyes, ears, nose, throat, took samples of our hair, scraping of our skin.
And were then released. What seemed like a moment later, they heard a second set of beeping sounds, and they seemed to lose dull memory of what had happened during the time between the two sets of beeps. And they just sort of drove on home, knowing that they'd seen a UFO, but not thinking anything else of it.
The story the Hills told of their experience seems too bizarre to be believed. Is there any tangible proof of their UFO encounter? After the Hills reported the incident to local authorities, Air Force astronomer Walter Webb was assigned to investigate their story. According to Walter Webb and other researchers who have since investigated the case, Mrs. Hill had no special knowledge of astronomy, only a remarkable memory.
And while Betty was aboard the ship, she was conscious enough to look around and ask questions. And she saw what appeared to be a star map on the wall on the inside of this ship. And she asked who apparently was the leader of the group what it represented. And he says, well, it's our sector of the universe. Well, Betty remembered that, apparently. It was imprinted in her subconscious. And Betty was able to draw a sketch of what she had seen on that star map inside the ship. No one really knew just what it meant, except that a brilliant young woman by the name of Marjorie Fish looked at it and said, I think I can make some sense out of that. And over the course of about 6 years, Marjorie Fish put together what she thought that map that Betty remembered represented. But on that map were a couple of star systems that were not discovered until the late 60s. Once we made those additional discoveries, the Fish map became very valid. The place that the captain of the ship told Betty that they were from was a star system that we call Zeta Reticuli.
If the drawing she made turned out to be an accurate representation of the arrangement of certain stars, it could constitute proof that the story of her abduction was true. But does this prove that she was shown this by a space traveler from another world?
Betty and Barney didn't make it up, because over the years since, that's a tiny part of a vast amount of evidence that these are real events. The emotional involvement, the impact of this experience on both of them indicate to me that this was a real story.
Still, it was a bizarre story that didn't get much notice outside the ranks of UFO investigators. Betty and Barney Hill might well have been forgotten. But then, in 1973, newspapers and TV stations from coast to coast exploded with an even more fantastic story: the abduction of Charlie Hickson and Calvin Parker. Like Betty and Barney, Charlie and Calvin were just two average citizens doing average things.
They were fishing in Pascagoula, Mississippi on October 11th, 1973, when they heard a noise. They described hazy blue lights that quickly became visible as a dish-shaped object. They said 3 beings that appeared to be robots floated out of the craft toward them.
According to both Hickson and Parker, they were then taken inside the UFO. Later, Charlie and Calvin both told terrifying stories of samples of various kinds being drawn, cut, and scraped from different parts of their bodies. Then, abruptly, they were released.
Soon the Hickson-Parker abduction was something everybody was talking about. They were national news.
The Charlie Hickson-Calvin Parker abduction got worldwide attention and reminded researchers of Betty and Barney Hill's story a decade earlier. A search for real proof was now underway. But does it exist? Is there such a thing as hard evidence? Many people claim that while the stories of alleged UFO abductees may sound convincing, there is in fact no real scientific evidence to prove or disprove it. But are there abduction stories for which reliable proof does exist? Bud Hopkins has devoted his entire adult life to working with the trauma of UFO abductees and investigating their stories.
I've worked with over 500 people in the past 20 years, and of that 500, most of those people I've looked into multiple abductions. There are many physical marks that turn up after an abduction experience. A person can describe a physical process taking place on something being done to their thigh, and you check the place and there's a scoop mark or a long straight cut.
Dr. David Jacobs is a professor at Temple University and an author of several books on UFO abductions. He believes that the physical evidence is very real.
This includes actual scars. That is to say, scar tissue has formed, which of course is physiologically not possible in just a few-hour period, but that is what we do see.
Scars can be obtained in any number of ways. But what of the strange phenomenon of actual physical implants? Could this be the hard proof researchers are seeking?
I would say probably the majority of abductees have some sort of an implant in them. They describe an instrument that's placed high up their nose. They can hear a kind of crunching sound, feel a crunching sound as this instrument goes up through the cartilage, and it deposits a little sort of ball-like thing way up by their optic nerve or their pituitary glands. This happens in their ears as well.
And I could feel my ear being pulled as far from the skull as it could, and an instrument being intruded into my ear.
People wake up in the morning, there's blood all over the pillow from their nose or from their ear.
A little girl woke up, 9-year-old, his whole family are having these experiences. She was visiting a friend. She woke up in the morning with a memory of a strange face looking at her, and there was a huge long gash down her cheek and around underneath. The emergency room people took 18 stitches in it. The doctor said it was a scalpel cut, and it was of uniform depth, and it was extremely deep. And she has no memory of it. She didn't wake up from it. This is something that happened during the night, together with other memories. There is physical evidence all over the place.
Not only that, but people are physically missing from their normal environment. That is to say, they're not there. When they're in an abduction event, their parents are looking for them if they're kids, or their husband or wife doesn't know where they are. They're actually missing.
Dr. Carla Turner works with dozens of people who claim to have been abducted by UFOs. She believes that some abductees never fully recover from the shock and terror of what happened to them.
I had no intention of becoming a UFO researcher, but the issue was forced on me by the beings who invaded my life and my home and my family, everything. There can be no doubt that something real and deeply traumatic has happened to these people. Their whole concept of reality has been shattered by bizarre and inexplicable events. They certainly can no longer laugh at the idea of flying saucers and people from outer space the way other people can.
And yet, apparently, many abductees seem to lead normal lives for many years before remembering this traumatic event. Kathy Davis, for example, remembered one of the most terrifying of all alien encounters, the loss of her unborn child.
I met Kathy Davis in 1983 when she wrote to me about these marks that turned up on the ground after an odd experience.
Hello, Mr. Hopkins. This is Kathy Davis. Can you help me? I can't sleep. I don't know what's the matter with me.
What if we count backwards from 10?
10. Well, it was on the ranch. There were too many things happening that didn't make sense. The tool shed door was open, and I know I closed it. But I couldn't see anything in there when I looked. And I've been weeding my garden. I was outside. There was a burn on my lawn that was a perfect circle. I couldn't explain it. And Rusty, my poor dog, Rusty. Rusty! Rusty! I'm so scared. He was under the car. He never does that. As I was standing on my porch looking around, there was light. A light over me. And they come down and they got me. Somebody got me. And I was there. I was on the table. He hurt me. He hurt me bad. My baby's gone. Did they take my baby? Where is he?
This aspect of the Kathy Davis story makes it a truly incredible account. Might there not be some other explanation to the sudden and mysterious end to Kathy Davis's pregnancy?
But we've done a lot of tests. Lots of tests, and They've all come back negative, and I'm afraid you're not pregnant.
But Kathy had been sure she was pregnant. Could she have been mistaken? Was her abduction experience simply a vivid dream?
There is no doubt that the aliens are profoundly interested in human reproduction. The missing fetus aspect of the UFO abduction phenomena is far more widespread than people would like to believe. Kathy Davis's multiple encounters are not that rare either, and apparently this has happened to me too. When we finally got up enough information, we felt comfortable to talk with other family members, and it was several hours long of talking about the whole phenomenon. My former husband glanced over at his wife and he said, "I guess maybe that's what happened when you lost a baby." And I said, "I never lost a baby." And he said, "No, you've got to remember this, that in 1970, while I was on birth control pills, that I had become pregnant, and that a couple of months later I had had a very painful miscarriage. I was in a lot of pain. I was hysterical. I wouldn't let him take me to the doctor. And even after he told me this, I have no conscious memory of this occurring."
The problem with the abduction phenomenon is that it begins in infancy and goes through old age, and it does not stop from what we can tell. So everybody who's had abduction experiences oftentimes can look forward to having them again, and that's one of the really unfortunate aspects of this.
But even with vivid, reoccurring accounts of alien abduction, isn't it still possible that the supposed victim has somehow imagined the entire event?
In terms of hoaxes, outright hoaxes with abductions, I think they're very, very rare.
And if that is true, could we believe a similar story if it were verified by other witnesses?
There are good eyewitness accounts from credible individuals. There are multiple witness cases.
The most astounding tale of abduction was reportedly seen by many people. Would you believe your own eyes if you saw it?
Well, how come they're not seen over New York City? Those cases exist.
In our quest to learn the truth about the many accounts of alien abductions, we find that many such stories have come out only under hypnosis. And in the minds of many people, this invalidates the stories as reliable evidence. So should we then believe an abduction account that includes important portions that were remembered without hypnosis? And would it add to the credibility of the account if there were independent witnesses as well?
And in this particular case, a woman who had been abducted a number of times earlier, had been working with, remembered consciously being paralyzed, seeing a figure at the foot of the bed and so on. When we did a hypnotic regression session on it, she remembered having been floated out the window.
I came, and then what? What happened next?
It filled the room. And I didn't know what to do. I was by myself.
You saw the being, and then what?
It started coming towards me. And he was reaching out and started touching my face. And then, I don't remember much after that. There's like a white veil in front of my face. And I was all numb. My whole body, I couldn't move. It just felt like I was just hanging there. I remember I was all these lights. And then I remember I was in a ship. It was huge, and they took me into this room. And they put me on a table. And they started doing all these experiments and stuff on me.
And then what?
I'm not really sure.
What happened, though, which was so dramatic, was I began hearing from witnesses later on who saw this whole thing happen from stalled automobiles. They saw this craft above the building that she lived in. They saw the blue wide beam of light. They were transfixed looking at it. And they saw 4 figures rolled up in a kind of fetal position come flying out the window, 12 stories off the ground, and then unroll. One alien, Linda Cortilla in a nightgown, and then 2 aliens down below, and then they were all lifted up into the craft. and the craft then zoomed away. This is extraordinarily important because one car of witnesses was located at one place, another car was located up on the Brooklyn Bridge. I have 3 other witnesses at other locations in New York City, some very close, who saw aspects of this. There is absolutely no doubt that this took place.
If we now assume that UFO abductions really do happen, surely the inevitable question is why?
One of the witnesses who saw this was an extremely important political figure. And it was as if they were showing him, this is what we can do.
What purpose would it serve for aliens to come to our world and kidnap human beings, then release them again, often with their memory blocked?
It would seem that this is an attempt on the part of the UFO phenomenon to have a role in effect, or to let's say, affect world politics.
Is there any way to know who is likely to be the next abductee? Are the abductions part of some mysterious, larger mission, or just random acts?
Okay, there's no question in my mind that the abductions clearly represent an agenda the aliens have for humankind.
UFO researchers have documented hundreds of reports of UFO abductions. Are there any distinct patterns to these alleged abductions? Or do they seem to be utterly random?
Well, it seems to me the range of people who are involved in these experiences is total. It's the entire cross-section of the community.
Farmers, working people, military people, housewives, children. And this is a real zinger that a lot of people don't know about. But it involves university professors, and it involves prominent politicians.
We see it as being primarily clinical. That is to say, there is a certain agenda that they are fulfilling that uses human beings. Exactly what the endpoint of that agenda is, we're not sure of.
It would be nice to think that perhaps humanity and the best parts of humanity are common to other parts of our huge creation we call the universe. Why not check in on our little brothers, so to speak? That's one theory.
But the fact is we don't see them as coming here to help us, to cure cancer, to stop war, or anything like that.
Instead of mining for gold, they mine the human body and the human energy. They take from us physical materials. We don't know what they do with them. They take from us emotional energy. We are a great resource. And it's a one-way proposition as far as I can tell. They take and give nothing back.
But yet we don't see them coming here to take us over to do bad things to us.
Many people in this field of research believe that the aliens are taking material from us in a desperate bid to save their degenerating race. I'm not one of those who buys this.
However, this is a reproductively oriented phenomenon, and the endpoint from what we can see is the production of sort of small kind of babies that most people say don't look alien and they don't look human. They sort of look like a cross between the two. Most abductees will call them hybrids. We feel that the production of these offspring of the hybrids is one of the major purposes of the abduction phenomenon, but we don't know exactly why yet.
I would think perhaps that the fact that our species has been here as long as it has and has failed to overcome certain deep problems within mass humanity and individual humanity could be of great interest to those who have been able to overcome it. Now, that's another theory.
Genetic experiments, dying races from another world. So much of the abduction phenomenon seems to be based solely on mere speculation. And yet, to those who claim to have had the experience, all of this is very real and utterly terrifying, something that has changed their lives forever. Is humankind being used as part of some cosmic science project? Are there a multitude of alien races visiting our world, each with a different purpose for being here? Could it be someday soon they will make their presence known? Is it possible that this is all just preparation for a future intergalactic cooperation? Until then, the mystery of alien abductions will remain the most troubling of all the entries in the UFO Diaries.